what is the point? It is like 10th of July, 13 degrees outside, and it's meant to be summer, but I've heard so many gardeners say, what is the point? And so this video is why there are many points as to growing your own food. Is it worth it anymore? It is. I think it's more important than ever, in fact. Now I have to say, I do feel sorry for anyone who decided that 2024 would be the year that they take up gardening. Congratulations, you've chosen one of the hardest growing seasons to start with. Firstly, there are a lot of slug issues, which you can see a little bit of evidence around this cauliflower. But I've still got a cauliflower, so happy days. But also, we have had such a mild winter, and so the pest balance hasn't kind of had that nice reset. And now it is autumn, or at least it feels like autumn. And so if you were still gardening and you started in spring and you're still at it, congratulations, you have the right mindset of a proper gardener. So let me tell you a little bit of a story about why YouTube comments and gardening are related. So back in the day, when I was a wee lad, I used to I still do it, YouTube, and it was those negative comments. I might have 99 positive comments, but that one negative comment is the one that I would remember. As humans, we naturally have a negativity bias. That is why the news is so effective, because it is all kind of negative. And it's easy to think that like the whole world is against us, and I think it can feel like that a bit in the garden, because in the garden, like right now, it's been a pretty dismal season, but I'm harvesting potatoes. And the negativity bias is something that has had to overcome, but it can be useful in some cases. When I have a video and there's quite a lot of negative comments, that's a pattern. Maybe I did something that people didn't agree with, or I wasn't being fully genuine, and it is this kind of useful data point to work against. But when the world, especially things like the news, is predominantly negative, it is easy to lose hope. But I think hope is something that a garden can provide. That is one of the reasons why it is worth it. Even with all of the feeling like the whole season is against us, there is always those successes to look out for. So even though that this year has felt like it's been the most challenging regarding slugs, I would say that there were definitely more successes than failures. But when I was in the thick of it, I was just looking for the little things like, oh, at least the slugs aren't eating these chives, and these chives are actually on their second cut. What I did is, when they start going over, you just coppice them at the base, and they send up a load more leaves. So let's be honest, this year isn't a fair representation of what growing your own food is like. And I think that, okay, tough start, but there's so many positives around, and it provides a really nice contrast to day-to-day life. But, okay, you have the successes like rhubarb and harvesting. You know what I think really makes growing your own food worth it? It is transparent taste. It's an odd term, but stick with me. Rhubarb sticks. Oh dear. There's a real power to just like channeling out everything else and having tunnel vision, picking out these good successes. Like, look at this spring cabbage. And a simple mindset shift can make all of the difference. For example, I'm not weeding the garden, I'm harvesting nutrients. So this here could be next year's tomatoes. All this talk about weather, it's actually starting to warm up a bit. I feel heard. Firstly, why is it that homegrown food just tastes so good? Well, I think there are 3 core reasons. The first one is that you're harvesting it at peak freshness. So this pea here is an Oregon sugar pod, and it just tastes so good. When you have peak freshness, it also interlinks with the nutrient density of the food, of homegrown food, of the soil of it. That's a few reasons, but I'll branch that into one. The freshness, the flavour is linked with the nutrients. It's just amazing. I'm so happy to be having these peas. So the thing about growing your own food is that what you get as a result is this whole category of flavours that you get to enjoy that money cannot buy. Oh, The second reason why homegrown food tastes so good is that you get to grow varieties that are impossible to find in shops. Like, you know, celery, this Asturian tree cabbage. Wow, does it taste good? But I can't buy this from Tesco's. And the third reason why homegrown food tastes so good is about connection. You've put in the hard work, you've put in that effort, but you feel like you have, and I'm not trying to sound wacky at all, but you do have a relationship with the plants. You are the shepherd of the plants, you are helping them, you're encouraging them, you know the work that's put into it, and so the satisfaction alone, I think, enhances flavour. That psychological effect of the satisfying knowing of you've grown this food, I think it improves flavour. I don't know if science can prove that, but that's a theory I have. So what's been happening, especially in recent times, is that, quite rightly, we're losing faith and losing trust in the global food system. And the global food system is very much disconnected from nature, from flavours. And so by growing your own food, it's actually a really nice way of bringing that power back into our own hands and being able to think, you know what, rather than trying to support the global food system, which, let's be honest, I don't think anyone wants to truly support the global food system, instead, why can't we start to harness and create our own food systems? And creating our own food system can start in a garden. If you have a little balcony, you could just have a row of pots and you could have your own food. And that is like that first step into actually creating the change and building the world you believe in. There's a lot of things that supermarkets are doing that are really kind of exacerbating that loss of trust. For example, one of the supermarkets has a brand called Birchwood Farms, which it makes you think of this quaint farm in the British countryside producing food, and no, it's from industrial agriculture from the other side of the world. And so there's just so much going on. There's things like there's food and packets say contains foodstuffs. What on earth is a foodstuff? Well, I looked it up. A foodstuff is a substance used as food. I'd much rather carrots. And then you have the whole other thing, organic food. Why is it that food that is close to nature has to be labelled as something? So these are technically organic carrots. Okay, I don't have the certification, but they're grown organically. The carrots I could buy in a supermarket, they're just carrots. Now, if we applied the same logic to organic carrots, we'd have to call those chemical carrots because there are harmful chemicals that are used in the process of so much fruit and veg, especially in supermarkets. I would love to see how the consumer attitude would change if carrots were called chemical carrots, because I think it's only fair to treat things equally. Now, sadly, the cost of organic food is a luxury, and it really shouldn't be that case, but it's kind of why things like permaculture bring me so much hope, because as a default it is trying to make proper, nutritious, natural food the default option. I think as people we're getting a little bit fed up of reading the back of ingredients packets, and there are just a load of ingredients that look like they've been named as if someone has sneezed on a keyboard. We have no idea how to pronounce them, whereas this is going to be tender stem broccoli. I know the only input I've put into it is the compost that I've made. I've known the materials where that compost has come from. And I think the lovely thing about growing your own food is that whilst organic is a premium to buy in shops, suddenly by growing your own food, when done in the right way, it suddenly opens up the economic possibility of eating that kind of food where maybe it's too expensive to be able to afford in a shop. And I find that great. To grow your own food is suddenly making healthy food far more accessible. The biggest challenge, of course, is access to land. And so this is why community gardens and allotments are so important. And I think for me, what true wealth is in a modern world is a garden full of food. It could be a patio full of food. You've got wealth of nutrients, you've got wealth of flavour, you've got that wealth in terms of probably one of the only types of wealth that nature benefits from. You know what I think is a lovely thing about the gardening community, and community being that common unity of growing your own, is the willingness to share knowledge, to share ideas, to share seeds. And I don't think we can quite appreciate just how powerful it is to help someone down the road who's starting a garden by just dropping off some seeds or sharing a little bit of surplus of the food that you're doing. Like, those are, excuse the pun, but those are sowing the seeds for a change of a food system that we want to see. Instead of trying to compete against the supermarkets, we should create a system that just makes the idea of supermarkets redundant, and that can start in our gardens. It can be really easy when things aren't quite going our way, like for example slugs at the start of this season, to forget about the actual whole overview as to why we're growing. Growing, it's a skill, it's a really important skill. And I would actually argue, like, what is more important than growing your own food and nourishing your family? Like, we ask, is it worth it? It absolutely is worth it. So if you want to create your own food system and help your community create one, the principles of permaculture are super helpful. This video here is about 12 principles and using them for self-sufficiency, and they can also all be applied to community sufficiency. And so in this case, we can kind of produce our own food, make the old food system redundant, and just grow more gardens.